hardest things about being a founder that I've seen, and I see in a lot of the companies that we work with, is you have to trust people.
One of the pieces of advice I always tell founders is that create the bare bones, create an MVP.
The biggest thing a lot of founders that I find are afraid of is, what are people going to think?
Everyone hears about the exits, but no one hears about the failures or the challenges that companies have.
This is pretty funny. It feels like you've done this before a couple times.
I've done a lot of podcast interviews. I did one with The Peak. I don't know if you know The Peak.
The Peak. I believe I've heard of them.
They're the Canadian newsletter.
Yes.
So they're like Morning Brew, but for Canada.
Uh-huh.
But as a company, one of the reasons I wanted to do more of these behind the scenes type of podcasts and conversations is to educate other founders, the startup community, investors, things like that, on the real challenges and what goes actually behind the scenes when you build a company. Yeah. Everyone hears about the exits, but no one hears about the failures or the challenges that companies have. And everyone just dreams about the exits. But I think it's a good opportunity to let fellow founders know the challenges and what I went through, the decisions I made, what went through my head as I built the company. Because, I think it's very important. Being a founder is a very lonely journey. So I think these are one of the opportunities that I do want to have and share with the community.
That's fantastic. And I think community, especially the community of other people who want to follow footsteps, not only how you got there from the growth mindset or thinking about it from a business as a whole, but how did you actually build the company and each specific piece of it? I think that's really awesome that we get to dive into that today. And so where I really wanted to start with you today, Trung, is number one, the product, right? We talked a lot before about, and we can talk a little bit more later about how you've raised capital and the grit to build the company. But I want to focus on the product first, right? Number one, how did you determine the first product that you wanted to build, and how did you go about building that first product?
Yeah, so after that whole Eureka moment of there should be a motorized pulley system. That's really the general idea. It's a pulley system, it's motorized. That's what we want to build. A lot of people don't know, I actually have a finance background. I'm not an engineer by trade. Mm-hmm. So being a solar, non-technical founder was definitely challenging. The first thing I had to do was build a team. So I approached the business, not from a product perspective first, but from a business perspective. Let's look at the economics. Why are the other existing products in the market, $500, $1,000 per window just for a motor? Where do we play into that market? Who are our customers in that market? And then start building a team of engineers and business-minded folks on building a company around that. First and foremost, I had to make sure that the economics made sense. Make sure that there was a potential revenue driver and profitability that we could achieve by building this type of product, targeting a specific type of audience. So my first few hires around, colleagues I went to school with at Shirley School of Business, on the business and operations side. And then I started building a team of engineers. So our first CTO, Mark Bashara, still a current CTO and fantastic engineer, mechatronics background. So he really had a great understanding of mechanical, software, firmware, electronics, a little bit of everything, which is great. So highly recommend someone with a broad experience like a mechatronics engineer for any hardware company. And I just started slowly recruiting and building more team members around that, software, firmware, iOS, Android, cloud, all of that. And that was really my focus at the very beginning, just building the right team and making the right decisions on product. So I think an early stage startup CEOs, especially a non-technical founder, the role of the product manager is what they are.
Yeah.
They're making the decisions on what goes in the product, how do you price the product, what's the expected bill of materials, where are you going to sell the product, all the product related questions. And that's why I think the ideal startup CEO is a product manager at the very beginning before you hire a product manager. So I think that's the idea of how we started the company, hiring the right people and really focusing on being that product manager as the CEO.
Yeah. And I think that makes a lot of sense, right? You become basically the voice of your customer because, as you mentioned before, you were the first customer. And then you build a team that can really cover everything else that you don't know. And so thinking about yourself in the role as your own product manager, right? What were some of the challenges or the solutions that you were trying to find for your customers as that first product manager?
Great question. So I'll be honest, Gen 1 was tough. As the product manager, you make the decision on what goes in the product. So I think, and one of the pieces of advice I always tell founders is that create the bare bones, create an MVP, because if you over-engineer it with all the bells and whistles, it's going to cost so much time and so much money. It's going to increase the bill of materials cost, the cost of goods, all of that. So at the very, like our Gen 1 was, I think way too many like bells and whistles. We had an LED touchscreen, capacitive touch instead of physical buttons. We had the idea of a solar panel, which is great conceptually, but in execution, when you get feedback from customers, it was actually a bad idea. I'll explain why. But these are some of the features we had. Now we had a really beautiful design, but when it came down to it, the bill of materials was too high, and it was just too many bells and whistles. It was not too much of an MVP. So that's why I always stress founders, especially hardware founders, create the most simple product that solves the problem. Just get the product on the wall to motorize and lift your window shades, and that's it, right? The LED lights, that could come later in a future version. But I'll kind of explain some of the challenges we had with our first generation. But the solar panel, for example, great conceptually. The problem with the solar panel is that it needs to be plugged in. And that wire just to your window, a lot of customers didn't like that. It didn't pass the wife test. My wife didn't let me install it and have a clean look. The second thing is that if they do put it on the window, two things could happen. One, if they have a pet, the pet could play around with it, and they could disconnect it from the solar panel, and the solar panel acted as a battery as well. So the device wouldn't work. The second thing, the third thing was that if they do put it on the window and they open the window, it also disconnects. So conceptually, solar panel sounds great, but when you install it, how you install it, it can have a lot of like issues and challenges from the customer's perspective. So again, you learn this as you go along, but that's one of the things about being the product manager at the very beginning. You can't always ask the customer what they want, because back in the day, what did Henry Ford say? You ask the customer what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. Sometimes you have to make a bet. We made the bet. We learned a lot from Gen 1, and I think what we learned from Gen 1, we implemented in Gen 2, and that was a necessary learning curve for us. I'll give you a very, very good kind of summary here. Gen 1 costs us $80, $83 USD to make the product. Gen 2 is under 40. Gen 2 is faster, it's stronger, it's quieter. Gen 1 took 3 years to get to market. Gen 2 took 18 months. So you can see the difference there. We learned a lot from Gen 1. We were able to reduce the price by 50% of the cost of goods. And it was a lot more robust product. So we learned a lot with Gen 1. It was a necessary step for Gen 2. Yeah. But that's one of the learning curves that we went through, and that's something that I think a lot of founders are hesitant to share. Yeah. I'm not hesitant to share. It's one of the things you need to go through to get to a successful product that you could scale.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing, as well as in that learning process, you also determine how to do things very efficiently, right? When you look at a hardware business, it's very different than a software business. You actually have to build a material, you have to build an actual device. So not only are you putting additional resources in a team, and we can get into that a little bit later of like how you went about building the right team and scaling that team, but when you build the product and you start adding in more features or the better features, how do you maintain quality in that product? I've spoken to many founders who, as you start getting more and more customers, maybe the quality of the product starts to slip. What's RYSE been doing that has allowed you to really avoid that and deliver a better second product?
So I think with the Gen 2, you learn a lot. You get a lot of feedback from customers, what works, what doesn't work, and you're able to break down your bill of materials from your Gen 1 to make that improvement. At the same time, you have to work with your factory. You have to work with the factory because, especially a factory in China, they're experts when it comes to manufacturing. They'll give you feedback on how you improve the product, how you get the cost down. Another kind of key thing you really need is you need feet on the ground that represent you in China. Not a rep, not an agent, but actual full-time contractors or full-time employees that are dedicated to you. I don't like the idea of working with consultants or agencies or anything like that, because they're not focused on you. They're very distracted. They have a lot of clients. So we have full-time team members in China that oversee our production, that handle our quality control. You need that, especially if you're creating a physical product in China and overseas. You need a team in China to go to the factory every day to make sure they're doing everything right. You need a team in China to implement the quality control processes at the factory level, at the assembly line level. And people think that you have a design, you make it, you send it over to China, and they'll make it for you. That's like the design is like a 10% of the battle. The biggest battle is getting production and getting it right, because even us, we've had so much issues with a factory doing something wrong, rework, incomplete instructions or instructions that weren't clear enough, communication barriers and things like that. So that's why I always stress the importance that you need someone in China that has manufacturing expertise. And for us, like our team member in China, he worked at Foxconn. He worked for the big brands, Intel, Lenovo, the big companies that manufacture products in China. So he has a lot of experience. And this is one of the key things. If we didn't have him, I don't think we'd be where we are today. I think we'd have a lot more problems. Another thing it actually helped was we didn't have to fly to China anymore.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of companies here, they hire manufacturing engineers or manufacturing leads, and they're going to fly back and forth from China. That is stressful. That is, very tiresome. It drains your energy to flying back and forth and things like that. And at the beginning we had to do that when we set up the assembly line, when we worked with the factory. But eventually you just want somebody to be in China to handle that for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things. Even like some Series A, Series B, Series C companies that I speak with, they still have their head of manufacturing located in Toronto, located in California, flying back and forth. And to me, that doesn't make sense. Just have a team in China. It avoids flying back and forth. It speeds things up. They know how to deal with the factory. They know how to negotiate with the factory, things like that, as long as they represent you. Another fact is that if we didn't have that team member in China, I don't think we'd be where we are, because if you remember, China had when COVID hit.
Yes.
You couldn't fly into China.
Yeah.
Right? So if you couldn't fly into China, you can't get anything done. So we were lucky because the team member in China, they handled everything for us. A lot of the other hardware companies we spoke to, they had to shut down production until some of these bans were lifted, or they had to stay in China, quarantine, and then go through the production process and repeat the process when they flew back and forth. China was very strict with their no COVID policies.
Yeah. And so it sounds like you are able to, with the structure that you set up with the business, able to, number one, you're able to maintain the quality of the product. Number two, you're able to maintain the reliability by having boots on the ground there. And number three, you're able to, I guess, overcome any other shipping issues or things of that nature that would arise from something like a COVID. And so, thinking about this, I'm always thinking the next step for the business, right? And there's a couple different avenues that we can go down. We can go down in the avenue of how does your product integrate with other products, or how does somebody make it part of their sort of smart home experience. But before I want to get to that, I would love to talk a little bit more about your roadmap and where you see the product going and how it's going to fit into your customers' everyday lives in the future.
So I think one of the benefits of this product category is that there's no competition. What I mean by that is specifically for retrofits. So when we launched, there's nobody in the market, as I mentioned. And when someone came to our website and bought our product or whatnot, there's obviously a huge audience that asks us, hey, does it work with blinds? Does it work with curtains? Does it work with this and that? And unfortunately, at that time, it only worked with anything with a beaded chain or cord looped. But that doesn't mean that we weren't going to develop a product to serve that audience. So we built a brand, RYSE, a very strong brand for smart shades. The next products we're going to be developing is a smart curtain product, which we've already publicly announced and did a soft launch on. This will be out in the market by this summer, actually, summer 2024. So great product. It's another retrofit. It fits on a curtain rod or even a rail, and it's self-calibrated, so you could actually install it in under a minute. RYSE Smart Shade will take about 10-15 minutes per window. This you could get installed in under a minute. Very elegant product, very quiet, very strong. Again, works with a rod or rail. So that's the next product that we launched. After that, right now we're in R&D for a smart blind product. So if you know blinds, they're the ones that tilt, the traditional type of blinds that tilt using a rod. Yeah. So we are developing that solution next, and we're hoping that the launch will come at the end of the year.
Excellent. And first of all, fantastic that these products are being rolled out in this way. I'm also interested in, just to come in on top of that, right, competition in the space. You guys were first movers in this smart shade product. What type of competition has really popped up? And number two, how does that competition sort of integrate with other smart products, right? And what does the market look like that? Because I'm always thinking of, well, there's always going to be competition that joins. How are they going to be able to compete with you? And how do you stay a step ahead of everybody else?
So I always brag about this to anybody that asks, especially investors. But when it comes to smart shade, we have the patents for it. We have 5 issued, another 3 pending, filed in Canada, US, EU, China, Australia as well. And with our patents, we also have an Amazon Court Judgment Award. So Amazon launched their own kind of IP protection program. This is great. I think Amazon's doing a great job with this. They rebranded it. It's called the Apex program now. And what it does is that if you have a patent and if you have an IP and another seller is infringing on that patent, you can submit that complaint to Amazon. You make a small deposit. Amazon will reach out to the seller and ask them if they want to defend their product from being listed. If the other seller doesn't have IP, you win by default. If they do have IP, both of you guys go to Amazon, kind of submit your case, and Amazon becomes the judge, jury, and executioner. They become the decision maker on who actually has the patent's IP, and the other sellers get kicked off. Wow. If you win, you get your money back as well. It's a small amount. I think it's only like $2,000 or something like that. But initially, when the program came out, we went through the whole Amazon patent infringement program and process. We won that court judgment. So now, every month, I go on Amazon, I see if there's any copycats, and I just click to get them removed.
Yeah.
And Amazon removes them within 24 hours. It's pretty efficient.
Yeah.
And that's what has defended our position for Smart Shade. Now, Smart Curtain and Smart Blinds, different story. There have been existing solutions in the market. We're taking a very different approach. As much as it is a consumer product, we do have a strong B2B play. So if you think of smart curtains are more predominantly found in hotels. So we have a huge strategy targeting hotels, senior living facilities, multifamily in the States, apartments, things like that. A huge B2B strategy. And when we think about B2B, even wholesale into retail stores, we have to really think about the margins that they require. A lot of these other competitors in the market, they're just direct to consumer. So when they price their product, they're just pricing to sell through direct to consumer channels and eat a small margin in those channels. But we have to think that the retailers, the B2B partners, they're going to want a margin as well. So we have to price that into our product. And if we do that, we have to build a stronger, more robust product than the competition. So we don't compete on price. We never compete on price. We compete on quality. So the quality is there. It can be more expensive than the next, bell and whistle product in the market, but it is a lot more robust. When we think about product, we think about the entire experience. So great customer service. Yeah. We think about great warranty experience, return policies, all of that. So we make sure that our customer has a product that they're happy with, that they've installed. We do video chat calls and technical support that way. And that's what we're thinking about the other products in the market that is non-smart shades, specifically smart blinds and smart curtains. But that's how we think about our products. So it's not just about being the cheapest in the market. We think about quality. And we think about the channels we plan to sell in. Because if you think about it, Nest, Ecobee, they're very expensive smart thermostats. There are a lot more affordable ones in the market, but they still dominate. Yeah. Ring, the video doorbell, they're not the most affordable or the cheapest doorbell in the market, but they still dominate. So customers don't always just buy the most affordable solution. They buy something that's robust, high quality, and a brand they trust. Yeah. And that's what we're building.
I think brand that you trust is massive in this. And I think I go to Best Buy sometimes. And the last time I was in Best Buy, I actually saw RYSE product in Best Buy. And I was saying, wait, I know RYSE. Like, that's a product that I trust. And there's other product that I trust in that smart home section. And when I think about the smart home section, the biggest thing that people think about is like interoperability. And being able to somewhat, or if there is a way for these different companies to connect these different products to really create these new ecosystems where you can control them all in one place. Is there something in that space for you? And I don't know too much about the space in terms of the actual systems. Like, what does that look like right now? What does the market for it look like? And how does that really affect the RYSE business? And how are you attacking that?
Yeah. So, we listen to our customers. So I think the biggest complaint our customers have is the idea of having a bridge or a hub. Our technology right now uses Bluetooth to communicate to either a phone or to our bridge. And our bridge is connected to Wi-Fi, and that gets you cloud access. That gets you the ability to schedule your shades or connect it to voice speakers like Google Home, Amazon Alexa, Apple HomeKit, things like that. And consumers don't like the idea of paying for another bridge, right? So eventually, the long-term strategy is to get rid of the bridge. We do have a product roadmap that eventually will get there. But from a technical perspective, it's much more difficult today. And the reason is because Wi-Fi is what everyone has in their phones and what everyone is used to and what everyone wants. The challenge with Wi-Fi in our device is that our device, 2/3 of our customers buy the battery-powered version. And Wi-Fi drains battery like no tomorrow. Our device today will last up to 6 months, right? With our infrastructure today. If we were to remove our bridge and put Wi-Fi in the device, it'll last under a month. Wow. That's how bad Wi-Fi is. Now, mind you, there's new technologies coming out that's low Wi-Fi solution, and we're waiting for that. So eventually, we're going to develop a product portfolio that does get rid of the bridge, but that's not going to be for another year or two, and that's just to be completely honest. In the meantime, we're going to be trying to make our customers happy and alleviate the idea of the bridge or the extra cost by bundling it in, making it more affordable, making it easier to adopt, making it an afterthought. While we do that, we're waiting for the technology for a low Wi-Fi power solution to be readily available in the market, and we're going to launch that. The biggest kind of, the big name in the market right now, the big brand everyone's talking about it is Matter. Mm-hmm. So we're waiting for Matter over Wi-Fi to become available for us to adopt and put into our future products.
What's Matter? I don't know too much about it. Like, how does it work?
So Matter. So Matter is what's Google, Apple, and Amazon, they're backing it. And it's the idea that all the devices could speak on one communication protocol. For those that don't understand the smart home space, there's a lot of protocols you could communicate with your devices. Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, very popular because they're in our phones. Z-Wave, Zigbee, very, very prominent prominent communication protocols historically. And Matter operates on Thread or Wi-Fi. And like the only smartphone that has Thread in it is the new iPhone 15 Pro. So Thread is another communication protocol based off the Zigbee protocol, and it's low power. So that's the benefit of Thread. And the idea is that you would need a border router like a Apple HomePod or Amazon Alexa, and that would be the hub that connects to all your devices. So they're trying to make all the devices in your home compatible with Matter that could just speak to a Thread border router. Matter also has Matter over Wi-Fi, which is what we're waiting for, a technology that is low-powered Matter over Wi-Fi. And we're talking to Scilabs about that, and some of the other chip manufacturers on their solutions are waiting for a solid Matter over Wi-Fi solution because from our experience, and this is not to bash the market, but Thread still has their own issues that they have to deal with to communicate smoothly, and we don't want to control the experience. So we're waiting for Matter over Wi-Fi so we can control the experience. But the idea with Matter is that with Matter, all the devices in the smart home could play nicely with each other and speak to each other. Because right now, if you have one device that's Z-Wave, one device that's Zigbee, it can't talk to each other. Yeah. Unless you have a hub that has both Zigbee and Z-Wave in it. So the idea with Matter and Matter over Thread or Wi-Fi is that they're all interoperable and they all can communicate with each other. Yeah. And that's what we're waiting for the next generation of products.
That's fantastic. And I mean, thinking about that next generation of products, once there is that interoperability, I can only assume that the market's going to grow for you, right? The things that the product is going to be able to integrate with from both a B2C and B2B, B2B, from both a B2C and a B2B perspective are going to grow. So thinking about, both of those avenues of growth, where do you see a lot of the growth of the business coming from? We mentioned the B2B avenues with these different products. And I mentioned earlier seeing your product in Best Buy as well. And that's something that I think is pretty new for the business. What are your thoughts on sort of growing the business as a whole, growing the revenue? Where's the puck moving?
So historically, our business has been direct-to-consumer, B2C, running ads, selling on Shopify, Amazon, things like that. Our focus this year, 2024, and going forward is really a heavy B2B and retail strategy. So as I mentioned earlier, selling to senior living facilities, selling to hotels, selling to retailers. As you mentioned, retailers like Best Buy, we're already in. We definitely want to get the Lowe's and Home Depots of the world. And that's a huge focus for us. On the B2B side, I think it's a lot more interesting if you're able to sell large volume. We're talking to a huge MDU player that is expected to order 1,500 units. So that's a huge bulk order. That's a $300,000 order just right off the bat. Yeah. And that's what you want. You want these large orders from one customer that could then deploy it in the entire building. So that's what's interesting for us, rather than just selling B2C online. B2C helps us build the brand awareness and gets people understanding the product. You have your own landing page, website that educates consumers. But in our opinion, B2B is a lot more lucrative. And when you look at the smart home and you look at the division of revenues in the smart home, B2B, these large sales to these large customers, they account for about 60% of industry revenues. A third of it, 33%, is retail. Only 7% is direct to consumer or e-commerce. Mm-hmm. So that already gives you an idea that, our revenues today and what we're doing today, it's good. It only serves that 7% of the market. We need retail. We need B2B sales because that's going to give us the larger growth. And that's really our focus going forward. We're building the right team members. We're hiring more for this B2B growth. And, we're expecting a big 2024.
Fantastic. And thinking about the growth that you're going to experience, right? You're only touching the 7%. You're not touching the 93% currently. It takes me back to earlier in the conversation when we were talking about manufacturing and your current manufacturing situation in China and the benefit that it's had to have boots on the ground. Like, how do you scale that operation from 7% to 100% in terms of ratio? Obviously, I'm not using the best numbers here, but how do you scale that type of operation? Is there any fear around sort of trade agreements? How do you think about, also manufacturing and sending and shipping product to other countries? What's the whole thought process around scaling the manufacturing?
So I think, China has been good to us. I think people have a misconception that everyone goes to China because it's cheap labor or it's more affordable. Yes and no. It's more affordable because the talent in China when it comes to manufacturing, especially when it comes to production manufacturing and producing a physical product, they're experts. There's nowhere else in the world that is better than China. So people have this misconception that labor cost is low. It could be slightly lower, but it's still quite high. Mm-hmm. What China is really good for is their efficiency and their output per labor. So, I always say this, but if you think of how a car is made, Chrysler, for example, I used to work at Chrysler when I was in university. An assembly line is set up, and each part of the assembly process is handled by an employee. So they might put in the battery, they might put in the door, etc. If there's something wrong at the assembly line, they have to shut it down. If a part is missing, they have to shut it down until the part comes in. That's why, besides Chrysler, is Magna, the part supplier. So China is set up very similarly the same way. You have the factory, all the suppliers are around them. And it's not just a factory and suppliers. You're talking about a city of all suppliers, components, manufacturers around the same area, and that's what makes them efficient. They're able to output and produce a product at a much more efficient rate than anybody in North America can. And that's just my honest opinion. And that's why everything is made in China. The Apples of the world, the Nests, the Googles, they all make their products in China because they have the expertise to get the quality you want. Obviously, as long as you manage that process. But they have the expertise and they can help you scale. So, to answer your other part of the question there about scaling, again, it's just managing that process. Our factory doesn't have an issue scaling our production. In fact, they're pushing us to scale a lot more faster than we can right now. Now, the caveat to that is that you have to be careful when you scale too fast, because when you scale too fast and as the brand we want to be dedicated to our customers, you don't want to piss off your customers, because if you scale too fast, you sell too much product and you don't have customer support, technical support, installation support set up, customers are going to be pissed off. You need to be able to scale your operations internally in North America as much as you do with production. So we like to scale nice and slow, a slow and steady pace as we scale production. So if we plan on scaling production more, we're going to need to hire more staff for customer support, because that goes hand in hand. Of course. So that's how we think about scaling production as well as scaling the company on terms of an operation level. Now, another benefit of China is obviously the low cost, the expertise, especially with our factory. Our factory also has other locations outside of China. So the idea of the trade wars and the potential trade wars with China, our factory is already thinking about that. About if that does happen, if they do plan to lose customers, they could offload production to another facility in the Philippines. and they recently opened one in the Philippines. We're not ready for that one yet because we're still in batch production. But when we do move to more of a full scale month-to-month production, the Philippines factory is always there, always available for us to move into as well.
Fantastic. So you're all ready to scale not only the product, to scale the manufacturing. You made some really great points in terms of scaling with the growth properly, doing it not too fast so that you're able to maintain the same standards that RYSE has had, and that's been a big part of your brand. Like, how do you scale the brand from selling selling B2C to direct to consumer to now being more in retail or B2B? What type of challenges does that bring to you as a founder, and what type of, I guess, pathways or roadmaps or solutions do you think really are going to get you from point A to point B to being a trusted organization for B2B sales?
So I think you definitely need the right team members because we built the company based on a B2C model, based on an online customer acquisition, really leveraging Shopify. But selling in retail is a different beast. You definitely need a key point of contact to be a head of business development and sales, which what we have right now, leading that initiative to close and manage that relationship with the retailers. Even on the B2B side, you need a point of contact to handle that. Back then, a couple of years ago, it was myself and my CEO handling that, and it's not something that the CEO and the COO could do themselves. You need a hardcore hustler, business development, sales mindset person that can close these B2B deals. Obviously, the sales cycle is much lower than the initial cash that you could get from B2C sales. But these ticket sizes are much larger. As I mentioned, if somebody's ordering a 1,500 unit order, that's 300,000. That's right off the bat.
Yeah.
Right? That's what you want. So it takes a lot of dedication to build that. The marketing materials around that is different. The hires are different. The process of closing them are different. The account management is different. But again, it's a necessary step for us to expand our channel strategy and close some of these large B2B deals.
Yeah, I think that's also like one of the hardest things about being a founder that I've seen, and I see in a lot of the companies that we work with, is you have to trust people. And how do you go about finding the right people and trusting the right people? It can be difficult, but it's something that founders have to do, right? Correct. You have to expand your team to be able to do all of these and hit all of these milestones for the business. And I think we touched on it a little bit earlier, but I did want to ask you a little bit about your strategy. You're a person who we talked about having a lot of grit and being very driven, and we talked about that in the context of capital raising and not giving up on your business and going back to the well multiple times and trying different things. How do you sort of find that in some of your staff? How do you go about identifying the right talent and bringing them in? And why has RYSE been able to do that so successfully?
So I mentioned this earlier, but I think the founder has, at the very beginning at least, 3 core responsibilities. One is strategy, so setting the strategies, how to compete, where to play, the products, things like that. 2 is funding, as I mentioned, fundraising, talking to external stakeholders, investors, things like that. And 3rd is hiring or building the team and culture. Very important. So that's really my focus. If I'm talking about the biggest 3 things I do on a annual basis, those are the 3 buckets that I really focus on. And when it comes to hiring, you have to have a really robust hiring process and hire people that are aligned to your vision and your mission and what you're doing. You need hustlers out there. You need people with grit themselves. You need people that are very scrappy. You're a startup. You can't hire people that are just there for a paycheck. You gotta hire people that are willing to work their asses off to get shit done. I've interviewed a lot of people, and some of them are just there for a paycheck. Some of them work the bare minimum. We can't have that. And I think the idea of having new blood come in from time to time to reinvigorate the company and the culture, very important. I think you don't want to build a company based on the idea that just because someone's been there for so long, they get a little lethargic or a little lazy or anything like that. You want them to have a sense of meritocracy, where they're always hustling, they're always building, and it's your job as a founder to motivate them and build a culture around that hustle mentality. And I always use that word, like, we need more hustlers, we need more grit, we need to get the shit done. And I think at the end of the day, if you put if you challenge your team members and employees and they're able to execute, you have the right team members and employees. Obviously, everyone makes hiring mistakes and things like that, but have the vetting process in place where you do hire the right people, and you don't hire somebody just because they're talented. You hire them for the right attitude, and that's one of the core values I really look for. It's hire for attitude and not capabilities, because capabilities, obviously you want somebody that has the technical knowledge, but you want somebody with the right attitude first and foremost, because they're going to work their asses off and they're going to get the shit done that you need done.
Yeah, it's about creating the right culture,
Yeah.
right? The right culture of hard work, the right culture of people thinking about the goal and trying to get there together, right? And I think that's all. That might be, I think, most companies' like biggest challenge, because it's hard to take what you have, what's in your brain, and figure out how to put that into everybody else. They already have to come with it, right? And I think that's the toughest challenge. When you look at a business, especially one that's like growing and scaling, and RYSE is constantly is also in the process of raising capital while you make more and more revenue. There's other stakeholders that you bring in, and as a company like RYSE that's very community based, not only have you brought in investors or major investors as stakeholders, but you've also done these community rounds that have built a little bit of a community around the company. Like, how have you been able to sort of balance not only your employees, the culture around that, but the culture around your community and the culture around the other bigger investors that you've brought in? Because a lot of founders might not know how to do that and do that effectively.
So communication is key. It's actually pretty surprising, because I know a lot of angel investors that invest in are investors, and they complain to me as well about other startups they invest in with zero communication, which is kind of perplexing to me. I've introduced my angel investors to other startups and whatnot, and sometimes it is frustrating when the startup doesn't communicate, but it's better to over communicate than under communicate. And part of the fundraising process, some of these investors, they may be interested, they might download your deck, they might read the deck, but they don't invest until a year later, because they want to see how you communicate, how your progress is. And I think that's like very simple. That's the biggest thing. You have to communicate. You have to over communicate to your investors. Keep them updated every time there's big news. Do your quarterly reports, very important. Do your annual reports. Do your shareholders meeting on an annual basis. In my opinion, over communication is the key to make sure your community is happy, and that plays a role both on the investor side as well as your partners and your customers. You want to keep them up to date on the latest technologies you're working on, what's coming in the pipeline, all of that. So I think a lot of other startups, they might have the fear of communicating to their investors. They might think that the investors are pissed off or mad that the progress isn't as is. Just communicate, be very honest with it. There's going to be challenges. COVID was a challenge for everyone. Right now, the interest rates are a challenge to everyone. Venture funding is down 50% year over year. Communicate to your investors, because more often than not, they're going to be your biggest supporters. If you look at our captive, if you look at our investors, we have an investor that invests a couple thousand in the first round, and then they upped it up to 50, 100, 200,000 the next round. So that happens all the time. They want to see how you progress, right? They want to see how you communicate. And I think one of the things I really appreciate is some of these emails I get from our investors, where when we do send them an update, they reply and say, I really appreciate these updates. This is a great update. I'm telling all my friends and family about it, things like that. So I think a lot of founders and startups underestimate the value of just constant and consistent communication.
Yeah, I think that is a massive, third door for a lot of companies, is building that community and nurturing it. And all it takes is a little bit of communication, right? And I think the biggest thing a lot of founders that I find are afraid of is, what are people going to think? That always seems to be a massive stopping point just in every area when companies are scaling, is what are people going to think? And that type of fear around challenges, right? And if something goes wrong, how am I going to address that? And I think everything in a business comes down to who's running that business. And when I like to talk to founders, I always want to understand, what is your process personally for dealing with challenges, right? Every business is going to have a challenge at some point, something they have to overcome. So far, RYSE has done really great as a business, but when you've seen challenges that come, how do you get over that to the next side?
So one of the things I'm pretty good at is I actually don't stress that much. I think again, it takes time to build that kind of thick skin. You mentioned, some founders are very scared of what other people think. I don't give a shit, to be honest. I don't really give a shit unless you're my customers or investors or potential. I don't care what other founders or other investors that are not invested think. You have to do you at the end of the day. You have to build a very thick skin because there is going to be criticism. You're going to have, some angry customers. Take that as opportunity to learn, listen to their feedback, see where you can improve. You're not going to be able to make everyone happy. And I think that's one of the challenges people in general have, where they're always trying to make somebody happy. They're trying to make everyone happy. At the end of the day, you can't do that. Your product, your company fits a specific type of audience. Make them happy. Be happy about that, and don't stress if you get a criticism here and there. Use that opportunity to improve the company, improve yourself. So I think that's one of the biggest things. I don't stress. I don't take anything personally. I have a thick skin. There's going to be criticism. There's going to be people that talk shit about you, talk shit about the company. It is what it is. It's not the end of the day. And you can't stress, because stressing doesn't do anything. It doesn't help. Yeah. So I think that's it comes with being a founder, the idea of grit, the idea of not really giving a shit about what they think. And that's how I really kind of approach a lot of these problems. If there's going to be a problem, let's figure out what the solution is, right? There's always going to be a solution. Let's just take a step back. Let's not stress about it. Let's figure out what the solution is, because the worst thing you do is stress, and then that energy will pass on to your company, your employees. They're going to feel it. Yeah. Right? You don't want that. You want the idea of you can't be a pessimist. You want a positive vibe, and again, it's just a problem solving type of culture. You have okay, this is a problem we have. What are our solutions? Don't bring me problems, just bring me solutions, right? And that's how I think about problems. That's how I think about some of these challenges that come up. It's another opportunity to figure out a solution.
So we've been talking a lot about culture, your self-development, how you overcome challenges. A big thing for a lot of founders or people who are really doing anything in life to sort of build these skills is to take advantage of mentors, right? For you and yourself, who have been the core mentors for you to help you get to this point, and really in your own personal development and growth as well?
So when I was in university, one of my professors, fourth year finance professor, Gregory Milewski, very popular professor in Schulich, really gave me a sense of direction. Because, back then I was figuring out what I wanted to do. Did I want to go into finance, investment banking, things like that? And, I graduated in 2009 during the market crash. So all the finance jobs were just dead in the water, right? No one was hiring. Everyone was pulling out of the Canadian economy, things like that. But he gave me a sense of direction. And he's one of those professors that trusts and believes that you could be anything you want. So I think he really gave me the ability to remain motivated, especially when a lot of us, you're in university, you're still trying to figure out what you want to do for the rest of your life, right? So he's someone that I always attribute a lot of my, not to say success, but direction towards, right? Business mentors, I always say fellow hardware startups in my space. So not directly in the smart home space or in the window blind space, but I talked to a lot of other startup founders in the space. I had conversations with Stuart at Ecobee, and he recommended some great books that I follow up on. Jimmy, the CEO of Nanoleaf, great guy, gives me a lot of advice and direction as well. A lot of our advisors, so Ryan over at BlendJet, he's the CEO of BlendJet, the number one blender in North America and whatnot. Great guy as well, one of our advisors. So, I really surround myself with other fellow hardware startups founders, and that's very important. I think software has its place, but you're creating a physical product. You're gonna want to talk to other hardware guys that been in your shoes, and some of these guys sell in the tens of millions of dollars. Like Ecobee just had a very successful exit, so it just makes sense that you speak and bounce ideas with other hardware founders, right? Yeah. And that's really who I surround myself with. If I have an issue, I just text them right away and they respond back. And that's what you want. You want to be able to surround yourself with other players that have done it, what you've done. It wouldn't make sense to, surround myself with other SaaS companies or AI companies today, because, that's not really our focus, right? Our focus is hardware. We have production issues. We have distribution issues. And that's what you really want to do.
Yeah. That makes quite a lot of sense. And when it comes to the mentors that have shaped you, obviously there's people in your direct life. Outside of the people that you know directly, are there any mentors that you look to just in the general zeitgeist? Are there any founders that you really looked up to? Is there some type of content that you tend to follow?
Yeah.
What's been a really guiding post for you just outside of your personal networks as well?
So oddly enough, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I would say a few of my favorite. One of them is definitely How I Built This with Guy Raz.
Yeah, great podcast.
Amazing podcast. I think I obviously listen to the podcast where he's interviewing more founders that sell physical products. So one of my favorite ones was actually the podcast he did with Bonobos, Andy Dunn, and that was great. Like, Andy was very, very honest about his challenges building Bonobos, some of the founder conflicts and whatnot, the growth issues. And then, I recently bought Andy's book, Burn Rate, as well. I haven't read it yet, but, he's very honest with his challenges on the mental space and things like that. But that's a really great podcast. I always tell other founders to listen to it because you learn a lot from other founders. And I think this is one of the things that a lot of startup founders don't realize. Like, just listen to other founders' stories and you'll learn a lot from them. And Guy Raz has a huge, library of interesting stories and great stories where you can learn a lot from. Other kind of, I would say, mentors in the market is just, you read books from other startup founders that have done it, especially in my space. Like Steve Jobs' great book, amazing book, one of my favorite books. I just finished Elon Musk's book, another great book, really motivating. There's another book called Build by Tony Fadell. And for those that don't know who Tony Fadell is, he is the founder of Nest, obviously acquired by Google for $3.2 billion. He also worked under Steve Jobs, launched the iPhone and iPod, I believe, with Steve Jobs. So he knows the hardware space. And one of the things I've learned by just reading his book is that, Nest had to develop the whole smart home space in Best Buy. They had to partner with Best Buy, and they had to convince Best Buy to develop this whole smart home pavilion in Best Buy. And it took them 3 generations of products before they got into Best Buy. Wow. So just like us, first gen was not that great, second gen, and then their third gen got into retail. We're happy our second gen got into retail. But the reason why that book is, really compelling for me, and is something I always have my team members read, is because it gives you the sense that hardware is a marathon, not a sprint. And I say this in every interview I have or every conversation I have, guys, this is a marathon, not a sprint. And when you read that book, you understand how long it took them to develop his product, launch into market. We're not software. I always say, like, software, develop an app, develop a website, launch in a couple weeks and do sprints and improve upon it. Yeah. And I understand that's why investors love software, because it's just much more faster. But, hardware has its place in the world, and, the best things are hardware. Like, you're talking about iPhones of the world and Teslas of the world. So I read a lot of books from other founders and famous CEOs that have done what we're trying to accomplish, especially in the hardware space.
Yeah. I think that is a fantastic answer, first of all. And when you look at other hardware products, talking about Nest, like, it's a very major exit that they had. What are some of the other companies, the exits that you've been seeing, and what's the exit for RYSE? What's the goal? What's the long-term vision for you? Where's B in terms of talking from point A to point B? Where do you think you're going, and what's the process to get there?
Yeah. So I really think we're trying to build this company to be we're trying to build this company to be successful for everyone involved, our employees, our team members, our investors. And I think the best way to do that is to eventually get acquired. So position ourselves, build the company to be an attractive acquisition target. And the reason why I say that is because, going public is an arm and a leg. There's a lot of red tape. And me as a founder, I don't think the idea of running a publicly traded company is that appealing. Like, there's a lot of lost focus on short-term gains, quarterly reports, things like that. And I think our category fits well with other smart home players or motorized shade players. So at the end of the day, I think an acquisition makes sense. In our space, there's a lot of activity. So if you look at window blinds in general, you have Cofie that just went private through a private equity firm. You have Hunter Douglas, which also went private. 3G, the private equity firm, very famous private equity firm, just acquired them about a year ago. And for those that don't know who 3G is, they own Anheuser-Busch, the alcohol company. They own Heinz Ketchup. They own a bunch of restaurant brands and very famous companies, and now they own Hunter Douglas. So the idea that private equity is acquiring players in our space is very attractive to us. You also have smart home exits. EcoBeach just got acquired about a year ago. Nest, obviously, I mentioned Ring, the video doorbell.
Yep.
$1 billion exit by Amazon, things like that. So I think what you're going to see going forward is that you're going to see both industry consolidation in the window blind space where we play, as well as the smart home space. So we're super excited about both. I don't think the idea of an IPO is that attractive to me. Not to say that it won't happen or it's not off the tables, but I think to me it makes the most sense that we join another larger player, and it's a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, I think that's a major win for your investors, for the community, for the company as well. Thinking about that as well, and just thinking about the different players in the space and the exits that have happened, but some of the other players in the space that have stayed. A lot of people bring up the Vivints of the world. Like, how does RYSE fit in with those types of companies that are sort of larger players in the smart home space as well?
So there's different, I would say, tiers when you think of the smart home. You think of like Google, Amazon, Alexa, Apple HomeKit, things like that. They're the DIY platforms in the market where you go into Best Buy, you pick and choose the gadgets you want, you hook it up to their platform. Then you have that's on the one end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, you have the Control 4s of the world, the higher end custom homes where they're installing home theater systems, heated flooring, LED lights, all of that expensive stuff.
Yeah.
That's on the high end, and that's where you need a professional installer. And you're talking about projects from $20,000 to $100,000, even more sometimes. So those are the two ends of the spectrums. Then you have the middle of the spectrum, which are called managed services. The Vivints of the worlds, the Alarm.coms of the worlds, the Smart Rents of the worlds, where they go in and you're paying them a monthly fee, but they go in and set everything up for you. They pick the DIY products. They're not as expensive as the Control 4s, but you're paying a monthly fee and you get everything you need. And it's a streamlined service. You get the security aspect of things. You pay that monthly fee for the access to the cameras, all the services, and then support and all of that. And me personally, I love that model. Like if I live in a house, managed service, no headaches, any issues, call support. They handle everything for me. There's pros and cons in each of them, but those are the three kind of tiers that exist in the world today where you could kind of set up your smart home. You could either do it yourself. You could do hire a managed service provider like the Vivint Homes, Alarm.coms, and Smart Rents, or you could do a custom home with the Control 4s of the world.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I would love the nice custom home with the ride shade. The ride shades there, nice custom setup. That sounds fantastic. But I think you're definitely correct. Managed services is going to actually probably become a bigger and bigger factor in the market.
It's definitely part of our B2B play.
Right, as these products become sort of more cost effective as well as they become sort of more proliferated within the market. So there's a big play there, and then there's also the thought of the exit as well for investors. So all really good different directions that the company's going in. Going back to sort of your overall vision, what do you want people to think of the company as when, obviously you play in the hardware space, but when somebody thinks about RYSE, what do you want a customer to think about ultimately now and in the future before you even go towards an exit?
So our goal is to build this brand. Just like when you think of Kleenex, you think of the tissue. Nest, you're going to think of the thermostat or Ecobee thermostat. Nanoleaf, you're going to think of lighted panels. So I think our goal with the brand RYSE is anything related to smart blinds and shades. So untapped category, definitely huge potential. That's the brand we want to build, and I think a lot of I would say investors are sleeping on this opportunity because it may not be the sexiest category. We're talking about window blinds, but that's our job. Our job is to make it sexy, right? Our job is to evoke that emotion and make it mainstream, and that's our vision. Our vision is to be able to make our products more affordable and mass produce and target the audience of that already have window blinds and shades installed with our technology and our solution. And when somebody thinks of RYSE, we want them to think of smart blinds and shades. Go to our website, buy our product. Go to Best Buy, buy our product, and that's what we want at the end of the day to build the company to be. We don't want to be just another low cost brand on the shelf that is poor quality. We want to be a high quality brand, just like Ecobee, just like Nest. And we look up to those brands and how they've done and how successful they are, and we really try to learn from them.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of hardware brands look up to you. Yeah. Trung, thanks for your time today. It was awesome to us to speak.
I appreciate it.
I hope you have a good rest of the day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, man.
Take care.
Take care. See ya.